explore these teachings that take us to the depths and heights of who we are. We're going deep this morning. No bones about it. We're going to be exploring, you can say we're going to be exploring our roots as spiritual beings having a human experience. And we're going to be doing it through the lens, mostly through the lens of Gnosticism, which is esoteric Christianity. We're going to get into all of that and what that is. I think you'll enjoy the ride. Okay? So as we come in and settle in, let's just become aware of this inner space by slowing down the breath. This system, it's got a mind of its own. It really does. So just find your breath, relax. It's Sunday, going into sacred space. What a joy and a blessing it is to have the luxury of taking this time. As we close our eyes and quiet the breath, deepen the flow of breath, we're switching brain waves from beta to alpha, allowing this insight to come online so that we can switch from an outward turning focus to an inward turning focus. This is really the path, the way of the spiritual reality. It's an inner journey. It's a journey to the core of who you are, and it is a path to know yourself in the truest sense of that term. And so let's leave all the baggage outside and allow this to be sacred space, and allow the light of insight to brighten and amplify and light up inner space. We call in all the great masters and guides, manifestations of Holy Spirit, connecting that current of the higher self to this moment and the flow of breath. That we graft our consciousness back into the great tree of life through this sacred breath, this Ruach HaKodesh. And so it is. Okay. Welcome, my friends. We are going to, like I had said earlier, for many of you who didn't hear this, we're going to be exploring our roots today. And when I say that, what immediately comes to mind is the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is talking about the Ashwata tree. And the Ashwata tree is the tree of creation. And as Krishna describes it to Arjuna, is this tree is with its roots above and its branches below. And so this is an organic view of creation where the pattern, the parent archetype of creation, the roots are above. They're superconscious. And the branching and manifesting on the twigs and leaves and fruits are going down. So it's a cascade or an emanating view of life that it starts from above and it goes into expression below. And so that's why the Hermetic dictum, the great rule of Hermes, says, as above, so below. We know this, yes? The rubric of the Emerald Tablet. And it's also as within, so without. Right? This is the Hermetic principle. It's the first principle. So that we have to come out of our sleep as 21st century Americans. As we're going to see in a minute, we're in the psychology of Carl Jung, our inner vision, our third eye, if you will, has atrophied. And as a result of this atrophy, we are unable, without development, cultivation, and willingness, to even sense or perceive or indwell these inner sacred spaces. And so we have to come out of this delusion or this dream or this fantasy, because when our eye is asleep, we're not creating the thought forms that align us with this true reality. And so we're in this cocoon of false thinking. And so we have to recognize that amnesia, that sleep, and come out of it. Because what we are is this direct and immediate expression of divine reality. What is above is below. What is within is without. We are a fractal pattern that is ever connected to this oceanic presence of God consciousness. We are manifestations of God consciousness, no different as a wave is to an ocean. Our inheritance is infinite, limitless, bounteous, beautiful, and blissful. And because we're asleep, we don't know it. And those purveyors of sleep want you to stay asleep and look outside of yourself and find security and safety and belonging and success in possessions of things outside of yourself. That is a pathway into nothingness. The pathway inward is where you're going to find your treasure, and you're going to wake up and realize you're actually the master of your dream. You're not the slave of somebody else's dream. But those are your options, as starkly contrasted as I can make them. You're either the master of your dream or you're the slave of somebody else's dream. Okay, so these teachings are designed to set the captives free. They're designed to get you out of the pharaonic Egypt of working for somebody else's idolatrous projects, right? You are the one that is ready or not to know who you are as the master of truth and reality. This is the teaching. It comes directly and immediately to you. Because what these teachings are going to say is that you didn't have your origin down below. Your origin isn't from below, as we've been saying. Your origin is from above. Your roots are from above. And so we're going to explore. First, we're going to actually look at Origen. Does anyone know who Origen was? He was a 3rd century church father. No? Origen was a Christian early on, 2nd, 3rd century Christian. And later on, by church councils, he was labeled a heretic. Because one of the teachings of Origen, who was a consummate philosopher and theologian, was that we all originated from above. That there's a spark or essence of who we are, what in the Greek he would call the nous, or the intellect, the consciousness, the light of mind. That is a divine creation. And it was originated in the beginning. Now, all of this, I hope, doesn't burden you with all of these ideas and concepts, but what Origen means by beginning, capital B, is exactly what we were talking about. It's this realm above. It's beyond time, right? It's before time. It's before matter. It's before the creation of the universe. There's an aspect of you that is at home there in a state of grace forever. That's who you are, says Origen and many others, and we'll get into that. And that aspect of you, that mental, intellectual aspect of you, is the light of God. And it exists within the beginning. And as a result, and again, just being brief here, as a result of losing the fire of God's love, right, becoming compromised in our own nature as to expressing and giving love, we, according to Origen and the way he says it, we cooled off. And as we cooled off because we were no longer in God's love, we congealed part of our nature and entered into matter and fell asleep. Okay? Remember, these are all metaphors, but sometimes they really do point to that experience. By losing the ability to love totally and divinely, we forgot ourselves because we are that love. And when we're not expressing that love on its own terms, we're alienating ourselves from ourselves. And so Origen is basically saying that's what our roots were: divine co-creation and love, eternal. And as a result of willfulness and separating ourselves off from that, we entered into an altered state of consciousness and embodied into matter. Okay? You could see why the church didn't want him around. Right? Because that gives a sense of reality to the deepest part of you to wake up to your power. Right? You're a divine being that's truly independent of the world and the authorities of the world. Right? You're set free from all the lower archons or principalities and powers when you wake up to this in yourself. Right? So just a little bit about this view of the pre-existence of the soul from Origen. For Origen, God is essential goodness, and consequently he wills to have beings to whom he may convey his goodness by giving them life and knowledge of himself. To this end, God creates, apparently without reference to time, the rational natures. They are minds, all incorporeal, in other words, beyond the body. Right? Limitless. Body is a symbol of limits. These minds, our root, is limitless. Equal and eternal with one another. No hierarchy. No divisions. We can imagine them as pupils in a heavenly schoolroom, directing their attention to the Logos, the Word, right? What in Christianity would be called the Son, capital S-O-N. That's the archetype of all minds. Just like the Son is the expression of the archetype of the Father, right? So there's, again, a cascade and a creating and a proliferating of the one idea of God in a multitude of ways. And so this is coming back to the immediacy of the question and answer of who are you? Right? We have to, again, wake up from our sleep of being 21st century Americans, because it's giving us a sense of self that is really worthless. You're a consumer. You're someone who has a function within the established order, and if you fulfill that, you'll be rewarded. And if you don't find yourself fitting into that establishment, then you're rejected, and you have no value. And so we see that there is this existential crisis going on, because more and more are being rejected from the established order. And so these teachings come as a balm and a healing, because it gives you access again to this self that you are, that transcends the established order, and that your value doesn't depend on how much money you make, what car you drive, where you live, who you know, what you wear. None of it matters when you've accessed the treasure of your own consciousness, right? So this is why these teachings have direct and immediate impact to who we are. They're not far off and pie in the sky. They're ways of reconnecting again to our roots and waking us up to this deeper nature. So, just a little bit more here. The rational natures, right, our deepest nature, the mind, also participate in God, but do so through the archetype of the Logos, or the one Son. Thus, the Father is archetype with respect to the Word, while the Word is archetype with respect to the rational beings. In this way, life and knowledge are radiated from the Father through the Son and in the Holy Spirit to the rational beings. In summary, Origen's view of the beginning is one of a rich spiritual unity. The distinctions between Father, Son, and Spirit are not meant to divide the Godhead. And the fact that the rational natures or minds or souls are created does not prevent them from participating fully in the life of the Creator. The emphasis in this vision is upon God's revelation of himself. And if knowledge is the key word, it is a knowledge that includes not only what we should call intellectual understanding, but also the moral and spiritual aspects of our nature. So we'll end with Origen there, but he gives us the link to carry it forward into the next leg of our journey. Knowledge. What he means by knowledge is the Greek word gnosis. That's what knowledge is. It's a direct, immediate, intimate understanding or insight into who you really are as a spiritual being. Right? It's illuminative. It doesn't have to go through a rational, conceptual process. When you're ready to know, you'll get the flash. You'll know. Just like when you know you're in love. Right? It's that kind of a thing. And this type of knowledge, like when you know you're in love, makes you want to join with what you know, because you see a oneness there. That's what gnosis is. Gnosis is the return of the knowledge of the oneness of reality, where you're no longer separating yourself from one another. You're loving one another because you see everyone in the light of knowledge. This is the way back home, right? To stoke those hidden fires of divine love within the heart. That's how we go home, right? Or we stay cool and congealed. You guys still with me? Good? So, this book is by Peter Kingsley. He's a really good author. I'm loving this book. It's called Cattlefack. And what Cattlefack is, it's the wooden box that a coffin sits on when a statesman dies, right? A person of note. You know, when you see those lines of people going by the Pope's coffin or the Queen's coffin or Lenin or Stalin, where this is the Cattlefack, okay? And so the title of this book is Cattlefack, and the subtitle is Carl Jung and the End of Humanity, right? It's a real page turner, let me tell you. And we only bring it in here this morning because what Peter Kingsley does, and I think does a fantastic job, is he links Carl Jung, one of the eminent psychologists of the 20th century, to the Gnostic roots that we're talking about. And we'll just read a little bit here. Now, Jungian psychology exists in all sorts of shapes and forms and sizes for people to use or let themselves be charmed by, as they choose. Once, though, it was no more than a trembling fear, Jungian psychology. And that's where the real magic lies. Through his initial confrontation with the depths of the unconscious, at those points where the borderline keeps shifting between insanity and sanity, then back again. All of a sudden, Jung found himself terrifyingly alone. Or at least that was how he felt to begin with, until he fell straight into the lap of the Gnostics. With the help of surviving fragments from Gnostic writings, which for the most part happen to be passages hatefully quoted by early Christian saints, just to prove how perverse and dangerous their teachings were, he came across people who had already experienced what he was experiencing. He recognized that he was in the presence of psychologists who managed to anticipate his psychology by 2,000 years. Found living friends, allies, companions, was no longer on his own. And not only were they still alive deep down inside him, he realized, to his even greater surprise, that a part of him was still alive inside them. Right? So here to point out that the Gnostics were adept depth psychologists. In other words, they plumbed their own depths. And that's what we have to do as 21st century Americans in order to reclaim the lost treasure, right? It might not be a simple, easy fix because we've become so estranged from our divine root or our divine inheritance. Sometimes it's going to require these really difficult choices to be who you think you are or be who you really are. And so that's why these teachings, as Jesus says in the Gospels, the path is narrow and few find them. And the reason it being is because to find them, you have to confront yourself. You have to confront your inauthenticities. You have to confront your shadow. You have to confront all of these parts of yourself that have been out of the light and bring it back into the light. Okay? So Gnosticism, if we can say it in a simple way, is to sort out the real from the unreal in yourself and accept only the real and reject the unreal, and then stand in the light of your true being. And then be that light for others who will then go through a similar process of awakening, sorting out, and then honoring only the light in themselves, right? So when we honor only the light in ourselves, that has, like I was saying, tremendous impact on our personal, individual experience. But it also has us look at our relationships. Because oftentimes, because we have a mistaken view of ourselves, maybe we were told we were not enough, or something's wrong with us, or we lack value and self-worth or self-respect, we get into relationships that will naturally reinforce these paradigms and patterns. And so when we're doing these deep dives within our own psyche, we're having to readjust our self-worth oftentimes, which means if I'm in a relationship that's bound by me feeling less than or greater than, that's all going to be shaken and reoriented. So oftentimes these teachings feel like they're bringing chaos and catastrophe, but it's really just breaking up erroneous perception so that the light can come in, right? You're starting to really get what a geek I am? So what we just heard from Peter Kingsley is that at the time of Carl Jung's life, these Gnostic texts were being literally unearthed in Egypt. 1945, we started to discover what are called the Nag Hammadi codices. They were buried by these Gnostic groups in Egypt because they were being persecuted by the Orthodox Church. And so they had to secret these teachings away. And like time capsules, they came back into our psyche, into our collective mind in 1945. And this is what we have to date of all of the Nag Hammadi scriptures. This is the latest edition. And I'm not going to go too much into it, but what we want to point out is, first of all, these teachings are often couched in Christian terminology, but like we were seeing, they're really going beyond religion and culture. They're pointing directly to your deeper mind, your deeper self. So when you listen to these teachings, see that these symbols and names and theological terms, not to get hung up with that. See beyond them. They are just pointers for you to access the energy and presence behind the symbol. Like Carl Jung pointed out, a symbol has one foot in the world of material, conceptual reality, and the symbol has another foot in the spiritual dimension. And so what a symbol can do is be a portal and link you into the spiritual dimension if you understand the language of symbols and know how to operate with them. So when you hear Father and Son and rational nature, these are all symbols. But if you're quieting your mind down, like we were doing in the beginning, and feeling for the essence that these symbols are pointing you towards, then you can maybe, find that inner space and awaken that inner eye. Okay? And I promise you, sometimes I feel like, these talks can be a little heady or seemingly not applying to what we are experiencing in our life. But these are the basic mechanics, what I'm laying out here this morning, so that you can properly interpret the sacred traditions, no matter which one you find yourself in. Right? This is kind of like the general demarcation that gives you a magnetic north on how to navigate sacred teaching. Right? Because remember, sacred teaching is pointing you to you. So part of the disconnect that we've encountered collectively is that sacred teaching has divided us from ourselves and from one another. Oh, you're a Catholic. I'm a Calvinist. And so I, off the hop, don't like you, right? It's dividing. So not only does it create splits within humanity, but God or the divine is out there, beyond you, not you, inaccessible unless you have some secret formula or you give your power over to the priest or the institution. But this is where these teachings undo all that. These teachings are saying that all sacred traditions are designed to turn you inward and direct you directly back into your own heart. There, as one of the great church fathers, Athanasius, said, God became man so man can become God, that Christ may be born in you, as the New Testament says, that you may discover that you are one nature and one self with the Christ. And that means you have to walk the path. You have to be willing to go in. You have to go through the symbols like doors and enter into your inmost heart, that secret place where the Father will meet you and resurrect you in your nature. Right? This is all real. It's just been clouded over and confused and obfuscated with false thinking. Okay? So this is a Gnostic teaching. The title does not help in keeping it simple. The title is the Tripartite Tractate. It's actually beautiful, but it wasn't published under that title. That was a scholarly choice, and you could see it's not very inviting. So in this section, this is a Valentinian text, and Valentinus was an ancient bishop of the Christian church, but he was also a Gnostic. And what is being spoken of here in this 2,000-year-old text is what we find in the Bible in the book of Hebrews, where it's referred to as the church of the firstborn. The church of the firstborn. And that's what Origen was talking about, that at our root, we are these divine intellects or divine minds, and we exist within this beginning, capital B, which is before time and space. In Greek Orthodox teaching, this would be the uncreated, right? In Zen Buddhism, this would be the unborn. In Advaita Vedanta, this would be the ajata, the unborn, the uncreated, right? Before time ever was, you are. Who are you? So, just a little bit here. So the offspring of God are the ones who are without number and limit, and at the same time, indivisible. So this is what's so beautiful about this reality, is that we are all distinct divine beings, but we exist in unbreakable unity. So we are simultaneously one and distinct, so that we are co-creators within our own centers, but what we create together is shared by all. That's at that beginning or unborn or uncreated level of ourself. That's where we are at home. We're at home in grace. We are at home in total sharing. We are at home in total unconditional love. That's what we're looking for down here. But we can't find it down here. We have to find it by going within, cultivating this love, giving this love down here. And that opens the doorway home. Is this making sense? So all of these created beings that we are have issued from the Son and the Father in the same way, listen to this, in the same way as kisses. So in other words, when the divine Trinity creates, what is emanated or born or created out of that expression are like kisses. So he's saying that our innermost essence is like a divine kiss. Like we came into being as a divine kiss. That's why Jesus in A Course in Miracles says, you have to come to realize that you are wholly loved and wholly lovable. That at the very core of your identity is God kissing you into being. You can't get more beautiful than that. That is the ananda, that is the bliss. Right? It's the giggle of knowing this unimaginable love is you and given to you every moment, every moment. So we all came into being as kisses. As when two people abundantly embrace one another in a good and insatiable thought, it is a single embrace, but consists of many kisses. This is the church that consists of many people and exists before the eons. This is the nature of these holy, imperishable souls upon which the Son rests, since it is his essence. And so they are not rooted here below, he says. Those who belong to that place are ineffable and innumerable. Right? And they exist in unspeakable joy. So that's why the pathway home, like we were saying, might feel like we're going through very difficult experiences, reorienting in our relationships, confronting our shadows, dealing with our vices and our lusts and our fears, and all of that will sometimes require all that we got to break through. But as we come through those experiences, we are still heading towards this destination where we will come to know it was totally worth it. It was everything that we wanted. If we don't give up, if we stay willing, we come into this place of true union, true joy. Okay. So finally here, we're going to be looking at A Course in Miracles. Let's see where we want to go with this. Okay. So one of the things that Peter Kingsley will point out in that book on Carl Jung is that we are, as Western people, we are brought up in a Judeo-Christian environment. Our culture is Judeo-Christian. And so these teachings will really speak to our own depth. And what Kingsley says, what Jung was doing, was trying to find in his psychology an approach that would bring the best of Gnosticism with the best of psychology to open us up to the core of who we are. And I would submit that A Course in Miracles is that asking. Jung didn't see its inception. It came 15 years after Jung passed. But A Course in Miracles is the best of Gnostic Christianity and depth psychology. And you'll see the Gnostic flavor here when I read to you this. You could give the love of God to everything you see and touch and remember. Let me say that again. You who could give the love of God to everything you see and touch and remember are literally denying heaven to yourself. I call upon you to remember that I have chosen you to teach the kingdom to the kingdom. There are no exceptions in this lesson because the lack of exceptions is the lesson. We are all from above. We fell asleep and forgot that. The only way home is to reawaken the love of God within our own heart. And so he says, we are to give the love of God to everything we see, touch, and remember. That's our go-to, that's our practice, to give the love of God to everything we see, touch, and remember. And he says if we don't do that, we deny heaven to ourselves. We cut our own self off from the joy, the abundance, the peace that this gift would give to us. That's why he says, I call upon you to remember. Note the idea of remembering. We already knew it. We forgot it. I call upon you to remember that I have chosen you to teach the kingdom to the kingdom. So there's only one self here. There's only one divine presence here, and we are it. We're confused in our thinking, and we are cut off from our own root. But that doesn't deny the fact that's who we are, right? So then he says, nothing is as easy to perceive as truth. This is the perception which is immediate, clear, and natural. And he's speaking to all of us when he says, we have trained ourselves not to see it, and this has been very difficult for us. So perceiving or knowing the truth, this gnosis, is as natural as breathing. But we have gone out of our way in this conditioning process to forget that and identify with who we're not. And this has been all of our suffering. It's an inward disconnect that we are suffering from. And then here he says this beautifully. Grace is the natural state of every child of God. When he is not in a state of grace, he is out of his natural environment and does not function well. Everything he does becomes a strain because he was not created for the environment in which he was made. He therefore cannot adapt to it, nor can he adapt it to him. There is no point in trying. You're not at home here. You're at home in a state of grace. A son of God, a child of God, is happy only if he knows he is with God. Right? The gnosis, the direct knowledge that God is at my core. So we have a class coming up on Tuesday in October. We're going to be exploring the teachings of Sri Ramana Maharshi, one of the great sages of India in the 20th century. And one of the main focuses of Ramana's teaching is that you focus on the one who's saying, I am. Because the one who is saying, I am, is the I am of God. But we have confused it with, I am this body, I am a man, I am an American, I am so-and-so, and on it goes. We've cocooned ourselves into these false identity patterns, and we've lost the root of the I am. So with Ramana and these ancient Christians, when you go into the heart of the I am, you'll find that what you were saying was the I is God saying I. That's how close God is to you. That's why in Sufi teachings, the mystical teachings of Islam, it says that only God can say I. So this is the root of who we are, where we say I from. That's why this isn't abstract. It's not outside you. It's not something that a future time will bring to you. When you go to the root of your own I, there you will know God, and you will know yourself, and you will know all living things, because we all exist in the one I in the beginning, in a state of grace, forever. That's the beatific state, and that's what this world desperately needs. And when you deny yourself that reality, you're denying it to the whole world. And you will experience the lack, the struggle, the strain, the suffering that only your willingness to go back home could alleviate. It's never a problem out there. It's we are in a habit of denying our root, our I, and the source of it. Yeah? I don't want to come down too heavy on you. This is actually good news. So let's put a stop to it here and before we send the bag around. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Yes.
So early on, you were talking about the atrophy of the third eye, and I'll kind of read it into a little bit about what you said. Like you were talking about consumerism, and I'm assuming that extrinsic value of consumerism is closing that eye off. How do you, or what would you recommend about how to create a more hypertrophy in that eye to open it and make it blossom and bloom? Like, what are some of the more intrinsic value-oriented steps to take to open that?
Very good question. And I would just mention that consumerism and getting lost in the idols of form and objects and, acquisition is a symptom of the atrophied eye, right? So when we're asleep, then we're vulnerable to the lower magic, right? But when we're awake, it would just be, we would laugh at it. So it's a symptom. It's not the cause of the atrophy. What to do? You turn within. You create some kind of structure of meditating every morning, where your meditation is really looking at who is saying I. Who am I? And as you go through this process, you're going to develop these inner muscles, and it's going to open up the strength of your inner sight to be able to see into the contents of your mind. You'll be developing your witnessing capacity. So when we know this probably from many spiritual traditions, when you are the witness, you're the one seeing or watching. You're not the object in which you are viewing, right? So if you're witnessing your emotional state, you're not your emotions. You're not your thoughts. You're not your bodily sensations. And you can get to a place where you're actually witnessing the one who is saying I, or the ego image, the self-concept. And then you'll begin to tease apart the fact that you're the light of awareness. You're not the image that you've been portraying yourself to be. And so that's the immediate recognition that your light is the light of divine truth, and you've never left your source. And when you identify with that witness, the ego is undone. And then that light will shine through your thoughts, your emotions, and your body. All the vehicles will be in service to that one light and no longer in service to the ego. So it takes that inward practicing of sorting out, who am I? I'm not this, I'm not that. Come to class on Monday night. Come to Sunday service. Join my Thursday night group. We do this all the time. And you'll see all of the different angles in which, when you're operating alone, sometimes they're blind spots that would really help. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I had another question. So you were reading about the 2,000-year-old Gnostic text, and then you're reading from the Course of Miracles, which is pretty much brand new. I personally have a different, feels different, like taste or feel to the Course of Miracles than the older text. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't want to say it at the time because I think I laid enough on you guys this morning, but Gnosticism isn't a monolith. There were several schools of Gnosticism. And so when you read some of these Gnostic texts from the Nag Hammadi, there are different flavors and ways of approach and interpreting things. And so they're not all coherent in that regard. So you can't lump them into a monolith. But what I do find in affinity with the purer forms of Gnosticism from the ancient world and A Course in Miracles is the cosmology of A Course in Miracles, if I can say that. That if you really study the Course, you'll see a very much a Gnostic view in the separation from God and the fall into time. Right? So very similar. That's why if you read the Tripartite Tractate, if you have some spare time, look at that. And you'll see, if you're aware of the Course, a lot of strong parallels. And the Pistis Sophia is another one. Yeah. Good? Okay. Other thoughts? Or are we at time? I can't really see the clock. Is it 10 of? So we have a few more minutes, if you like. Questions, comments? Don't feel shy. If you have pushback, there's no dumb question. This is how we grow. Feel free. Yes.
Does the book that you were using on the Nag Hammadi contain the Gospels of the apostles that were missing?
That we're missing, you said?
Magdalene,
There's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Judas, yes, are in that. Mm-hmm. Hmm? Gospel of Thomas is in that, yeah. Okay. Anybody else? No? Blue bag's going to go around. If you're joining on YouTube or Facebook, click the link below. You can donate to the church. We greatly appreciate your support in keeping these services alive and continuing. And we bless this offering with gratitude. May it be used to bring the good, the true, and the beautiful into this world, into all hearts and minds. So it is. Amen. Okay, let's rise, seal the deal. As we quiet the mind and move into the center of the heart, let's be love in all expressions today. Let's go out and bring light into our relationships and healing and joy into our life by remembering who we are and praying for that knowledge to come directly back into our awareness so that we can be set free and set others free as a result. And in this light of true freedom, we will know that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Thank you for being here. Join us tomorrow, 7:15 p.m., Course in Miracles.